It's the summer of 2003. Gas is still under $2 a gallon. The economy's humming, and parked outside every strip mall, every suburban driveway, every valet line from Dallas to Detroit, there it is. 7,000 pounds of black steel and chrome, squared-off fenders, a grill the size of a refrigerator door. It looks like the Army rolled a tank into a showroom and slapped a sticker price on it. The Hummer H2. In 2003, this thing wasn't just a vehicle. It was a statement. It said, "I made it. I don't answer to anyone, and I definitely don't need to parallel park." GM moved over 35,000 of them that year alone. Celebrities lined up. Athletes rolled out of practice facilities in them. You couldn't watch an episode of MTV Cribs without seeing one sitting in a driveway next to a swimming pool shaped like a guitar. For a brief, glorious, utterly American moment, the H2 was the king of the road. But here's where it gets ugly. Underneath all that military swagger and sheet metal bravado was a machine riddled with compromises, engineering shortcuts, and a handful of mechanical time bombs ticking quietly beneath every owner's feet. This is the untold truth of the Hummer H2. To understand the H2, you have to understand what GM was selling, and it wasn't just a truck. It was mythology. The original Hummer, the H1, was built for the U.S. military, the high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle. The HMMWV, the Humvee. That machine earned its reputation the hard way, in the deserts of Kuwait, the mountains of Bosnia, the streets of Mogadishu. It could ford rivers, climb 60-degree grades, and navigate terrain that would swallow a lesser vehicle whole. It was the real deal. AM General sold the civilian version starting in 1992, largely on the back of Arnold Schwarzenegger personally badgering the company until they agreed, and the H1 delivered. It was massive, it was brutal, and it genuinely could do everything the ads claimed. Then GM got involved. In 1999, GM acquired the Hummer brand, and they had a vision. Take that military credibility, bolt it to something they could actually build at scale and sell to middle-class Americans, and cash in on the post-9/11 wave of patriotism and power that was washing over the country. The H2 was born, and the marketing was masterful, like nothing else. That was the tagline. The ads showed H2s cresting desert dunes, plowing through rivers, dominating mountain passes. The message was clear. This is the direct descendant of the machine that won wars. Buy one and some of that toughness transfers to you. But here's what they didn't put in the brochure. The H2 was not built on a military platform. It was not engineered from the ground up as a capable off-road machine. It was built on the GMT 820, the same chassis that underpinned the same Chevy Suburban and the GMC Yukon XL. Let that sink in for a second. You were paying $50,000, sometimes north of $55,000, for what was, at its mechanical core, a dressed-up Suburban, a very, very expensive Chevy Suburban wearing body armor and a costume. Now, to be fair, the GMT 820 was a solid platform. The Suburban had been hauling American families for decades. It was reliable, well understood, and relatively easy to manufacture. GM knew it inside and out. But it was not designed to carry the weight and demands that the H2 body and marketing placed on it. The H2 weighed in at approximately 6,400 pounds curb weight. Some loaded configurations pushed past 8,600 pounds gross vehicle weight. That's not a truck. That's a small apartment building on wheels. And the GMT 820 platform, with its independent front suspension and recirculating ball steering, was never built to handle that kind of abuse, especially not off-road and especially not over time. Which brings us to the part nobody talked about at the dealership. Let's talk about the tie rods. On the H2, the front steering system used tie rods, connecting rods that link your steering gear to your front wheels. Standard equipment, nothing exotic, except that on this truck, those components were carrying a load they were never really designed for. The H2 community, the forums, the early owners, started talking about it almost immediately after the 2002 launch. Owners were reporting tie rod failures. Not just wear, not gradual looseness, sudden, catastrophic snapping, especially under off-road stress or after significant mileage on rough terrain. When a tie rod snaps on a 6,400-pound truck moving at highway speed, you don't gradually drift, you lose steering. Period. You're a passenger at that point, hoping the guardrail holds. GM issued technical service bulletins. Dealers replaced components. But the underlying issue, that the steering geometry and component spec wasn't properly matched to the vehicle's real-world weight and use case, persisted throughout the early production run. And it wasn't just the tie rods. The weight-to-suspension ratio was a chronic problem. The H2's independent front suspension was adapted from a platform designed for vehicles that weighed considerably less. Under the stress of the H2's bulk, especially owners who actually tried to use it off-road the way the ads suggested, the front suspension components wore out faster than expected. Ball joints, CV axles, control arm bushings. Owners in the forums started referring to the front end as a maintenance subscription. Then there was the fuel economy. The H2 returned somewhere between 9 and 13 miles per gallon, depending on conditions and how much of your soul you'd already sold to ExxonMobil. When gas prices started climbing toward $3 a gallon in 2004 and 2005, the math got painful fast. And the body, that signature boxy, military-inspired body, it wasn't aluminum, it wasn't hardened steel. It was fiberglass panels over a steel skeleton, which looked tough, but was surprisingly fragile in low-speed impacts. Fender benders that would have been a minor insurance claim on a regular truck could mean replacing entire body sections on an H2. But here's the really ironic part. For all its size, for all that mountain-conquering, river-forging advertising, the H2 had less ground clearance than the H1. It had less approach angle, less departure angle. The locking differentials were optional and rarely spec'd out by everyday buyers. A stock H2, straight from the dealership, was less capable off-road than a well-equipped Jeep Wrangler that cost half as much. The H2 was, in many ways, a very expensive optical illusion. By 2004, the tide was already starting to turn. Environmental groups had the H2 in their crosshairs. The What Would Jesus Drive campaign took direct aim at it. Anti-war protesters began keying them in parking lots, a phenomenon that got enough coverage that it had its own news cycle. A group called the Hummer Haters distributed fake parking tickets. The H2 had become a lightning rod, a symbol of American excess at the exact moment when America was starting to question whether excess was something to be proud of. And then the gas prices hit. 2005, 2006, the summer of 2008, when crude oil hit $145 a barrel and the national average for a gallon of regular touched $4.11. Suddenly, filling up an H2 wasn't just expensive, it was a public act of masochism. GM tried a smaller version, the H3, to chase the market down. It didn't save the brand. In 2009, as part of the bankruptcy restructuring that nearly ended General Motors entirely, GM announced the Hummer brand would be discontinued. A sale to a Chinese company fell through, and just like that, it was over. The last Hummer H2 rolled off the line in 2009.
So what do we make of it now? Here's the honest truth. The H2 was simultaneously one of the most brilliant pieces of marketing in American automotive history and one of the most audacious examples of selling image over substance. GM took the most powerful brand in military vehicle history, bolted it onto a repurposed Suburban chassis, charged a $50,000 premium, and sold it to tens of thousands of people who, let's be real, were mostly driving to the grocery store and taking their kids to soccer practice. That's not a condemnation. That's American capitalism doing exactly what it does. And for all its flaws, the tie rod issues, the suspension wear, the fuel costs, the fiberglass panels, there are still H2 owners today who wouldn't trade theirs for anything. Properly maintained, the platform is solid. The interior was genuinely spacious and comfortable. And off-road, with the right modifications and the right driver, an H2 can still do impressive work. The secondary market tells an interesting story too. Clean, low-mileage H2s, especially the earlier 2003 and 2004 models, have been holding their value in a way nobody predicted. Nostalgia is a powerful force, and there's something undeniably compelling about the H2's silhouette, even 20 years on. It's not an engineering masterpiece, it's not the honest heir to the H1's legacy, but it is, without question, a cultural artifact, a four-wheeled time capsule from a specific, unrepeatable moment in American life, when we were flush, when we were bold, when we believed bigger was always better, and when a machine that looked this mean could make you feel like you owned the road.